Just how accurate is the new Brian May AmpliTube software? Over the past couple of days I've done a few videos on the brilliant new software that enables you to be able to replicate Brian May's guitar tone either on your iPad, on your laptop or Mac. Now, a lot of people debating in the comments whether some of the presets are more accurate than others. That's something we're going to come to shortly. What's interesting though is if you actually go to the IK Multimedia website, there's a statement there from Brian May, and it says this machine is wild. It transforms your guitar into a different instrument in a different universe. In this case, my universe. Dial in one of the presets to get into Hammer to Fall, or Bow Rap, or Killer Queen. Then make your own custom adjustments to fine tune it and mold it and create the tone you want to own, and save. Enjoy. Brian May. So that's really one of the main points here, is to be able to make your own custom adjustments. So you don't necessarily just have to, faithfully rely on the presets that I put there. You are able to adjust them. Now, I had a very interesting conversation from someone from IK Multimedia, quite a long conversation, a lot of interesting points. I know I use the word interesting a lot, but it was a very interesting chat. Now, one of the things that I asked was, why was this not made years ago? I remember having AmpliTube on my laptop probably about 10 years ago. Maybe not as long ago as that. I had the Jimi Hendrix one, there was a heavy metal one, there's quite a few. Very good. I remember, I think the only reason I didn't use it as much was because it didn't have a treble booster or a Vox amplifier, so I couldn't try to recreate Brian May tones. And when the Jimi Hendrix one came out, my automatic thought was, why haven't they made a Brian May one? The reason, the technology back then probably couldn't handle what this one is able to do. So that answers that question. Now, if you actually look at aesthetically, if you actually look at Brian May AmpliTube, it actually looks really good. You've got the Cat Treble booster, classic, with the 70s, 80s and 90s switch. They're now out of stock if you wanted to buy one of them, £249, and it looks, squashed down to fit, but it looks exactly the same. It's got the same logo and everything. Now, this software has been 2 years in the making, so it's a lot of effort's gone into this. Brian May has had a lot of input into it, into what it looks like, what it sounds like. If you look at the actual amplifier, the Vox amplifier, now you'll notice that it hasn't got Vox written on. With a lot of software like this, I remember Guitar Rig 5 being very similar. They either didn't name it or they give it a different name. But the actual amp there, I think Brian May had his input into how that looked, so it would look the same as his amp. You'll notice the little Brian May sixpences on the top. Doesn't add to the sound, but it just adds to the whole feeling of that you're using a Brian May rig. If you look at the Fox phaser, now your original Fox phaser was spelled Foxx. It was called a Fox foot phaser. They've obviously altered the name of this. It's squashed down a bit, but essentially it looks exactly the same. Now, if you click on cab, you've got your 3 amps there. Obviously Vox, not written on, and they're able to be mic'd up. And you've got the, as we discussed in previous videos, we have, is it the wet, dry, wet setup. Now, one thing that was mentioned is the reason that we have the Stargate threshold, which is like a noise gate. This is because them 3 amps are very noisy, and people might, so you've got the option to kind of have the noise reduction, but you could actually turn that off if you wanted the real kind of setup. Also, we've got the Brian May pedal there. Realized now that really, if you've got a red special, turn that off. You don't need that. If, however, you're using a different guitar, then you would use that. Now if we go to another preset, if we went to something like Winter's Tale, we see there we've got the Dickey amp and we've got the little 9-volt battery there. Now I think Brian may let them look at the Dickey amp, so even the scratches that are on the Dickey amp are the same as the original. If we look at the little 9-volt battery there, it's got AmpliTube written on, but the design of it, I think for those in Britain will recognise it as an Ever-Ready battery. Yeah, I remember them as a kid. Also what I liked was in the left hand corner here you got battery power. Now this is when you're constantly learning when you're doing these type of videos. I didn't realise that Brian May likes to let the battery of the amp die down somewhat before he uses it because it gives a different sound. So you've actually got battery power there from off all the way up to 10, so you can actually alter the power of the battery. If we click cab, we've got the table there with the Dickey amp on with the battery, and even the table is the same. It's been designed the same as what Brian May uses, and even the flooring. And if we look in the studio, I think over the picture there, you'll see that they've replicated. So they've gone to a lot of fine detail. It doesn't add to the sound, but it adds to the feel of the software. And also I think it kind of shows you the level of what they were trying to recreate. They didn't have to, they could have just give you a load of presets, this is what it sounds like, but it really adds, and it's a very nice touch. Now when we come to the matter of the presets and whether or not they're as accurate as what we think that they are. Now bear with us on this because I may sound like I'm waffling on. About a month ago I wanted to record the guitar solo for Bohemian Rhapsody, and I found the isolated Bohemian Rhapsody guitar solo, and when I played the isolated guitar solo it actually sounded different to when you hear it with the record, the original record, when it's just its isolated track. Almost to the point where I was going to find out, try to see whether I wasn't sure whether it was somebody else playing it and passing it off on YouTube as an isolated track, even though it wasn't. But it was. So when you listen to isolated tracks, the guitar can sound somewhat different to how you hear it in your head when it's actually in the mix. And that's a very important point. Now, when this software is being made, they've had the people who've made it, along with Jimmy Humphries, who's kind of a big knowledge on how to get Brian May guitar sounds. They've had the isolated tracks, so they've been listening to what they really sound like, what we necessarily haven't heard. One of the points was for people who don't think they sound the same, they haven't heard the isolated guitar tracks, which is an interesting point, because so what you're hearing when you put it in the mix, it sounds very different in the mix. So we might think, oh, that's not quite right. At the same time, it's all dependent on your surroundings, what you sound like. So I can be using a preset here. If I was running this through me hi-fi using my guitar, that's going to sound different to somebody using the exact same preset running through an amp and using a different guitar or a different setup. What is your pickup selection? That's going to have even the room that you are in alters. If you think of something extreme like when David Gilmour recorded the intro guitar for Wish You Were Here, they actually hired a gymnasium to record the guitar in there so that it sounded like this huge sound, which you couldn't have done. Nowadays you would just use software to be able to do that, but even the room that you're in can alter the sound. So getting it accurate and like what it says on the website with Brian May there, alter to your own specifications. What you do have, if we look at post effects, is you have the EQ. So that gives you the ability to alter the EQ to how you want it and mold it to how you want it, because obviously you can record a guitar in a certain way. Once it goes through them two microphones and is recorded onto the tape, how it's mixed, they can alter the EQ on that to make it sound slightly different to what it did when it was recorded. So you've got stuff like that. So what are your thoughts? Were you impressed with it? Do you think there should have been something else? Me, very impressed with it, and we'll be using it a lot more. So as always, thank you for watching.